based on the last lot of minutes, no interest rate rises for the time being. What does this all mean, though, for house prices? Because what's happening with house prices? So let's just look at the month of February. CoreLogic puts a lot of numbers out. What determines the house price first? I mean, what are we talking about?
In really simple terms, it's supply and demand. Supply being the number of new dwellings that are added to the number of houses in the country, Australia-wide.
Yep.
So there's more houses built. There's a supply side, so people have got a bigger choice. The more buildings, the more construction that goes on, and demand. And that's mainly driven by population growth. And when there's immigration and the borders are reopening, people are coming in to get a job here. We've got skill shortages in the labour market. And the government has reopened the borders. And hard to tell just quickly how big the inflow of people will be. But Australia's a pretty good place. People want to come and live here. So I reckon we'll get that underlying demand coming back from population growth.
Can we just look at what is the general? What do you think today, given the borders just open? What is the sort of lag period we'd be looking? What are you as an economist? What are you baking in as a lag period?
Look, it's pretty quick. I'd say it's 3 months or less. Once you start getting an influx of people, and this is the housing market generically too, and this is important for investors. A lot of new immigrants rent. They don't necessarily stump up $1 million to buy their first house or whatever it happens to be. They rent until they get a job, till they get a secure employment, till they get their kids into a school.
A deposit.
And a deposit, and a whole bunch of issues happen. So they tend to, and where do you want to live? If you've come from overseas, I'm not quite sure whether I want to live in what city, what suburb, and all these other things. So there is a time lag, and their first entry into the housing market is as a renter. And given the rental market's also damn tight right now. There's not a lot of rental properties on there.
Rents are going up?
Rents are really going up. They're going up 7, 8, 9% in the latest numbers from the inflation numbers from the Bureau of Stats. That I reckon there's the first part of that wave will be rents going up, rental vacancy rates fall further, and then with another lag on that when people realise, and perhaps investors sort of say, gee, my gross rental yield's all of a sudden starting to pick up again. The RBA might not have hiked by then. I don't think they will have. So all of a sudden, my equation on negative gearing, investing improves dramatically because my rental return's going up really rapidly.
And probably going up at a faster rate than the interest on the loan that you have.
Yes. I think for the next 18 months, 2 years, yes, that's very, very likely.
So that sounds pretty good from a demand point of view. And in terms of supply, I saw... in terms of supply, that's new housing, but also properties put on the market, like up for auction, for example. I saw CoreLogic's numbers, I think it was this week, at least it came out, I think, beginning of this week, saying that the number of properties on the market this year compared to the same time last year was a lot greater, yet we have still got the same clearance rate, or fairly much the same clearance rate, around 75%. Yep. Of all properties on the market for auction cleared at 75% rate of 75% or 74.8 or something it was, but notwithstanding a whole lot more properties on the market for auction. So that sort of tells me something about people who are sellers, the vendors.
Yes, so you're quite right, and I think last year too, the last couple of years in fact, that were strange times. We were living through COVID and we had lockdowns opening up, that crazy time. People were sort of tending just to hunker down. They didn't want to do anything. And maybe that we're now learning to live with COVID, to be honest. They're saying, well, hang on, my house is now worth a lot more than I thought it was. I'm going to sell it. So you're quite right that the numbers of properties that buyers have got to choose from has increased a lot, but the buyer demand has also increased. That people are sort of stepping up and saying, well, hang on, interest rates are pretty low. My mortgage serviceability with a 2.75 interest rate, give or take, is pretty good. So I'm going to step up and buy. So you've got this supply and demand issue on properties on the market being pretty good. And as you said, the auction clearance rates in the first couple of weeks of 2022 have been really resilient.
Yeah, so, and whilst the price rise in somewhere like Sydney was only very small, it was marginal.
Yeah.
Given the number of properties up for sale, they were unbelievably resilient. So happy.
Indeed. And the thing, and I remember we discussed this last month, was that in 2021, house prices in Sydney, for example, were up about 25%. Places like Brisbane and Adelaide, and Hobart, it was almost 30%. You don't get 2 years in a row where that happens. And you look back at the last 40 years of house price history, we've had probably 5 or 6 episodes where you've had 20, 25% annual increases in house prices. Every time after that, there's a period of consolidation. Prices then don't go down 25%. They sort of stabilise, I think is the word. Look, in one or two little pockets, they might drop 2% or 3%, but that's after a 20% increase. So the momentum is still pretty strong. But the really interesting thing, Adelaide's still booming. Hobart is still booming. Brisbane and that southeast corner of Queensland is still booming. So, there's different housing markets in Australia. We've got the big cities perhaps slowing down. They're the most expensive ones, obviously. And I'll call it the less expensive cities. They're still on fire.